Morning, it's Mark. Don't you agree? People remember stories. I've chosen that virtual background to start my talk this morning because I came across this image when I was loading something on another site. And it's just a great way to play Scrabble. I guess people remember stories. So I'm going to change that background now so that I can just be talking to you more effectively without the background, because it seems that the images portray better. So good morning from my home office. It's Mark Kolke with my talk today. And I don't have a script. And most days I barely have 3 points written down, but I usually have a strong idea in my mind. I was reviewing some of my previous writing and some of my talks, and also catching up on some others the other day. And it's so much fun and fills you with so much energy when you see the guy with the thickest book, and he's the thinnest guy on stage, and he's rah, 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 all kinds of theatrics. And I know how that works. I've done lots of public speaking on a stage where the theatrics are really important to driving something home. But what I was finding in contrast to some of the things I was looking at the other day, those were people who are trying to sell you something. And those were people who are trying to tell you a story. And of course, the really clever ones, the smart ones who maybe got the brain damage of having tried and learned that the better way to be successful is not a hard sell of a product or a service, but to engage people, to engage an audience, whether it's an audience of one like you watching this, or whether it's an audience of hundreds in an auditorium when you're strutting a stage and trying to make a difference. The power, I think, of a story is not because someone in an audience is going to have experienced the same story, or that your story will be so fantastical that they just can't wait till the book comes out, because they see something in that story that resonates with them, whether it's tugging at a heartstring or a mistake moment. I think we give short shrift to our own stories very often. I think people that I've talked to, whether it's talking about inspired to write something or to get on a stage and speak, they feel their story isn't valuable. Some people have said to me, well, why would anybody want to listen to me? Why would anyone want to read my story or hear my story? And the reality is, people's stories are interesting. Your story is interesting. My story is interesting. And though a given story to someone might not be that dramatic for them, because they know the story, they've been through the story, they've lived through the story, they've got the heel prints in their forehead from the story, they've had the experience. And sometimes those experiences are painful experiences, whether the painful experiences of your personal life or your career, struggling with a boss or a subordinate, a colleague, a competitor, a neighbor where you can't agree on who should paint the fence. I mean, we have all kinds of mini and maxi dramas in our lives, and they all are tellable stories. They're relatable stories, because anything you've experienced, even though you might think this has only happened to me, I'm the only fool, or I'm the only person who's ever had to endure that particular difficulty. It's not true. There is no emotion you're experiencing that someone else hasn't experienced. There's no trouble you're fighting with or enduring that someone else hasn't fought with and endured. There's no triumph that you have that is really superior to anyone else's triumph, but the triumphs you have, however small, might be very, very important, pivotal examples for someone else to follow. Someone else will enjoy that story, or you're going to tell about an experience, a problem you had, and how you addressed it, how you snatched victory from the jaws of defeat, or jokingly, the other way is snatched failure from the jaws of victory. We can play word games all day long, but the simplistic, basic stories of authenticity, of saying, here's what happened to me. Here's what I did. Here's what I failed to do. Here's what I learned. Here's how I feel about it. Here's how this stepping stone helped me get to the next stepping stone, or saved me going off the cliff of despair. Everybody's got a story. And so for anyone who is reluctant to stand up and speak, who is reluctant to put pen to paper, to write something, you have value, no matter how poor you might be, how low your income might be, what societal measure of successes you've not achieved, your story matters. It just doesn't matter to you and your friends and your family. It matters to someone else who needs to hear it. So what am I really on about today? I'm on about if something gives your heart a thump emotionally. It could be the path to success or the savior from failure for someone else. So sharing your story is important. If you're not sharing your stories, maybe you could start. Don't have to be big and bold or famous or popular or on a big stage to do that. And for those who are troubled, who do have a problem they can't solve, we all know we can just Google our problem and there'll be somebody on a screen telling us how to solve it. Well, some of them are selling something, or they're trying to persuade you to do something you don't want to do. But also a large number of people are trying to help you. They're offering up their stories and their mission and their message so that it might be of help to you. And I guess that's what I'm doing too. But there's a silver lining in all of this. Whether you're watching, hearing, or reading someone else's story, or you're telling a story of your own on the page, on a blog, in a journal, in some sort of video format, or on a stage, it's cathartic. When you do it, you have no idea what that unleashes inside you until you've tried it. And I think most people who do, and they get over the initial jitters and the trials and tribulations of getting started and making something a regular practice and habit, will find that there is catharsis in it. There's catharsis in the product of doing something. It's partly a regimen or a routine of doing it, but it's also a thought process of what's developing your mind, of how am I going to tell a story? How am I going to make a point? How am I going to tell another story? Make another point. Stitch these stories together somehow, show how one led to another, or how they're the same, or how they're radically different, but how they're meaningful to you. And if they're meaningful to you and you care about them, your excitement, your passion, your importance will show. It'll show in your word choice. It will show in your expression. It will show in your gestures, your body movements, your body language will telegraph your message just as much as your words do. You have value to add to the world, often one person at a time. And the first person in that lineup is yourself. You do it for you because there's value in doing it. You do it for the next person because out there in the great masses of people, there's somebody who needs to hear your message, someone who needs to hear your story, someone who needs to understand your advice or your recommendations or the pain of your experiences. They're not going to do that by listening to a lecture. Nobody needs a pedantic approach to life when the real magic and the entertainment sometimes is in hearing someone's story. And if you enjoy hearing someone else's story, just imagine how much someone would enjoy hearing your story, his story or her story. I like the word his story because then it sounds like history. And I love that word. So that's a wrap for me for today. Thanks. It's Mark. Enjoy your day.